Good afternoon, Dr. Banks. Good afternoon, peers. My name is Isaac, and I am a co-host of the Worldview Podcast alongside my other two lovely co-hosts,
Brandon Ching
and Heidi Lynn.
Today we're going to be looking at an in-depth look at our three worldview essays and sprinkled in with some additional commentary from each other. We're going to start off by looking at Brandon Ching's.
Awesome. So, hello everyone. My name is Brandon Ching, like Isaac said, and my paper mainly focuses on the influence that my parents have had on a lot of my worldviews, whether it be religious or political views. So growing up, giving you a little background, I went K through 12 at Lomland Academy, which is an SDA academy. Here's me on my first day of kindergarten, as you can see, and also there's a picture of one of the gymnasiums over at Lomland Academy. So like I said, K through 12, so pretty much all my life I've been a part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Started with, Sabbath school here and there as a toddler, and then growing up, week after week, every Sabbath was church time, right? So, for the first, maybe I would say 10 to 12 years, my parents were fairly strict about certain rules, like, no TV on the Sabbath, things like that, and church every single Saturday. But as I started to get older, they started to give my own freedom a little bit, which I appreciated. They allowed me to, choose whether or not I went to church, as well as, if I had homework and things like that, they wouldn't mind if I worked on it then. Just small little things like that I really appreciated. I think throughout the years, I became a little bit oversaturated. I think it became very repetitive for me, and I started to I want to say veer away from the church, but my relationship with the church started to fade a little bit here and there as I started to get older throughout high school and things like that. Especially now, having being at La Sierra University, I've encountered many different people who have differing views, right? So it's allowed me to kind of widen my scope a little bit, and look at other worldviews and kind of helped to develop my worldview quite a bit, actually. So, like I said, grew up mainly in the STA church, and this right here is my family pictured. They've played a major role when it comes to, developing my worldview. Not for me, but kind of giving me guidelines and helping me to become the person I am today. There's my dad on the left and my mom in the bottom right, along with my sister in the bottom left. They've been very hands-on when it comes to my upbringing. They take us on tons of vacations. We have lots of family time together. As you can see, we took a trip to Europe not too long ago, so that was a lot of fun, and I'm very grateful for the support that they've given me throughout the years. If Isaac can move on to the rest of the pictures, I think I have a few examples of my childhood. So here is me with Tyler, another one of our peers, on Pizza Day. Very excited to deliver our pizza to the rest of our classmates. Next we have, I was also part of a lot of the leagues, the sports leagues that the church put on, so quite a few extracurriculars I did with the church as well. As well as Pathfinders. There's me and Isaac pictured here in our early years of Pathfinders. We're probably around 13 there, 12, 13. And here I am again with the rest of my Pathfinder group during a parade that we had. I think, is that all the pictures that we have, Isaac? Oh, and as I said, K through 12, so here is a picture of the graduation at Lomland Academy about 2 years ago. So yeah, all my life pretty much, SDA, STA, SDA. So it's definitely played a role when it comes to how I think about certain things nowadays.
Do you feel like you may kind of have a small worldview just because of how bubble?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I grew up, the SDA community is very, very cliquish, you could say, right? Everyone thinks the same, more or less. So definitely, I grew up in a bubble, I would say. So being at La Sierra University and being able to kind of broaden my views a little bit has been nice. It's been kind of a like a culture shock, you could say, but it's been very nice in helping me to develop and see more point of views, I guess you could say. So like I mentioned, another topic that I mentioned in my paper was politics, and it's a very touchy subject, I guess you could say, nowadays, especially with all the political things going on in the media. But once again, my parents have played a major role when it comes to helping me to develop my worldviews. They've my political views. Sorry, they've taught me about both sides. Of course, they've let me choose for my own, or decide for my own, more or less, when it comes to my political point of views. Both my parents, they're registered as Republicans, I, however, am registered with the Independent Party because I tend to agree with views from both sides, from both political parties, I could say. So they've been very supportive in that, and they've allowed me to make my own decisions and things like that. So once again, I'm very grateful to them for that.
I think it's pretty great that your parents are so supportive, like however you may want to think, and I think that probably helped shape your worldview quite a bit.
Oh, definitely, yeah. So like I said, they give me the guidelines, right, and they've let me kind of just go on my own path. So I'm very grateful for that, and I think it's definitely helped for me to think more for myself.
Do you, given that your parents are registered Republicans, you're independent, how do you think they would feel like if you did vote like blue, for example?
I don't think they definitely wouldn't be angry or anything, right? They would just want to make sure that I'm educated enough to make my own choice and to to defend the choice that I make, right? They definitely are very understanding, and they would hear what I have to say about certain things for sure. So they wouldn't be mad or anything at all.
That's cool.
Yeah. Oh, so another topic that I touched on my paper was about how in these last few months during the pandemic, how my outlook on life itself has changed. So before, we've had a few, difficult times within our family, but I never really understood how quickly things can change, right? Until these last few months, when earlier this year, my uncle actually, my close uncle that we spend a lot of time with, throughout with the church and everything like that, he ended up passing away, and he left behind my 3 daughters and a wife. So he left behind my cousins and who I grew up with. So that was very sudden and abrupt for our family. It was quite devastating. So that has really helped to shape the way that I look at life, and now I view it as much more, I guess you could say, precious, right? It's very fragile, and things can change, just like that. And it's really made me realize, what I have, and helped me to really be grateful for that, and know that life is just not something to be taken so lightly. So that my view on that has been altered quite a bit these last few months. But yeah, I'll touch up a little bit on that throughout my paper.
Has the passing of your uncle in any way affected how you view God?
I don't think so, no. Because growing up, my parents always told me, if bad things happen, you can't blame God for that, right? It's just the way things, had to be, and I've learned to not really. I don't really have, any resentment or anger towards anyone, really. I've learned to just kind of accept things for how they are, and yeah. So it hasn't really led to any kind of anger or anything like that towards God or anyone else. So I think it's good that I've been taught those lessons early. That way, when I'm experiencing these losses and things like that, I know where to kind of put my feelings, I guess you can say.
Yes, do you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. So I guess one thing that I would mention is that that in recent years, my views have changed quite a bit. After being exposed to different people and other point of views, right? Last year has helped me to meet new people who have differing, polarizing views, different from what I, have been different views from what I'm used to seeing in people growing up, right? Because like I said, in the SDA community, everyone more or less thinks the same. So being able to talk to these people and kind of see where their minds are, it's been a very big help when it comes to making me into my own person, right? And developing my own point of view.
Very nice. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Heidi, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'll go next. Alright, so my worldview is also pretty much an overview of, well, my essay is pretty much an overview of my life, so I feel like we gotta start from the beginning, right? So, back when I was really small, I went to church for a really short period of time. I think maybe for like a year. I don't really remember, but it didn't really matter too much to me because my mom stopped going to church, so we just kept moving on with my life. And I think a big part of my life was how busy every day was for me, right? I took so many extracurricular classes. I had choir, piano, art, golf, tennis, ice skating, taekwondo, like just like pretty much like everything on the spectrum, and ballet. These are just to name a few. I've like touched on a couple other things, but it's like too many to list. So as you can probably see, my life was pretty scheduled to the hour. School was also a big emphasis. It was like you have to do well in school, and here are a bunch of other options of things you can learn and get better at, is basically what my mom intended. So things like my ballet class, right? It was like one of my most passionate things. I feel like the whole time when I was doing ballet, it was always like a constant like competition with myself. Like how to be better and how to keep improving and how to just keep pushing like to the limits. And that's pretty much how I live my life. I have this clip here of me doing ballet back in like 2014, 2015. This is me turning. It was during one of my practices for like my solo, and as you can see, I fell down there, but like it was like you just it's just every day was just constantly pushing through, and just like not really stopping and taking a break. I was always just like trying to keep going, move forward. There's not really any time to stop and think about like feeling, I would say. Most of our life, it's always just like, what do you need to do to be better at this or this or this? And then so I feel like I lived a pretty busy first couple years of my life, and I would say how that impacted my world really was that since I didn't really have time to sit down and think about all these things, I didn't really think about my worldview. I didn't really have many ideas about things like religion and like my social life, or to say like politics. Like I didn't really care, because all I cared about was all these extracurriculars and just doing better. Yeah, so whenever I did start going to a Seventh-day Adventist church, I would say it really changed my worldview. So like there was a mom from my dance class a mom of a girl from my dance class who told my mom about Seventh-day Adventist church, and she was like, hey, this is something that I think is really great, and I think you should give it a shot, because she knew my mom would go to church, and my mom heard about it, and she was like, yeah, I think this church has teachings that I agree with, because what I learned was she left the last church because she didn't really agree with some of their teachings. So she started taking us to the Seventh-day Adventist church, and at first I was kind of like this is just another task, right? Like it's another thing I have to do every Saturday now, every Sabbath. But I realized as I kept going to church and to Pathfinders, it really became something more. If you can see my pictures, I have a picture from Pathfinders. So this is my group, I think like 2 years ago, and these people have really changed my life, I would say. I think I didn't realize how big of an impact Seventh-day Adventism would have on my life, but it did change a lot. It helped me. Well, one of the major things was Sabbath, a day of rest, a day set aside for us to think about God, think about ourselves, and it was like kind of like the first starting point of me actually having a worldview, I would say, and it's continued on to now, I say. And then a big turning point of my life when I was baptized. I have a picture from the day I was baptized, and it was June 11th, 2016. It just felt like a very symbolic day, right? Although I don't really know everything yet about the Bible and what it means Seventh-day Adventist, because I'm still learning. I feel like this was an important turning point of my world where I started to realize, oh, I can have thoughts, I can have ideas, I can like take a break once in a while and sit down and really think of me and think about the world. So, one of the major changes I made after being baptized was my diet as well. I don't really think it's like a super big part. It's important to a lot of Adventists, but it's not necessarily like required, I would say. I think that's what the view is now, but I do feel like changing my diet to align with Seventh-day Adventism really symbolizes and helps remind me on a daily basis of like, oh, you're Seventh-day Adventist. I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say here, but it really it's like a constant reminder. I feel like that I need to like stop and smell the roses kind of thing. Except it's like with my food, like, oh, I can't eat it. But like that's it's not like I don't. It was definitely a big change, but it was like a good reminder for me. I feel like it helped me live my life. I just feel like the whole point of like talking about this was like how much of a change I've been brought into my life, and how I went from like not being religious at all to suddenly believing all these like different like ideas, right? And it's been a big change, and I feel like I've experienced quite a big changes recently in these past years. So like one of the changes I said was going from a large like 4,000 people public school to like to like La Sierra. I won't say La Sierra is like tiny, but it is about half the size of my public school. In perspective, that is half of my graduating class. We have the other half on the other half of the football field, and I just felt like going from such a big school with all these different people, and then all of a sudden being condensed into like just a smaller atmosphere with less people. Like I feel like I pretty much know everyone in our class, even if I don't talk to them, which is like crazy to me because that would never happen in public school, right? And now it is more oriented like in last year we have like mandatory chapel, mandatory vespers, all that stuff, and I feel like it has, I guess, kind of helped me stay afloat a little bit, because everything got busy pretty quickly again this past few years, and I feel like it did help being in a Seventh-day Adventist college. It helped me still have those daily reminders, right, that I need to take a break once in a while, think a little more. But I do have a lot of aspects of really that I won't touch too much on my paper, but for example, one of them was like loyalty and friendship. It became a really big part of my worldview, especially recently. There are a couple of my high school friends that I am pretty close to now. To a few of them, I am really close to them now because of quarantine and everything, and I feel like it's just a big part of my world, knowing who you can rely on is there for you, and just building like a close-knit group, because I never really had that, right? I feel like it's been important to me to know all these, like, who I can trust, because it helped me also be more expressive and share more, I guess, as a person. I just feel like they've been really helpful with shaping my worldview, and there are people I can talk about pretty much anything, and yeah, it's all very important. Yeah, I don't want to go too long because
You
yeah.
you talked a little bit about uh always having a very like busy schedule, and then how has that changed at all, and how has that affected your worldview now being in college?
Well, since I stopped many of my extracurricular activities once I joined like Pathfinders in church because most of them were on Saturday, or like I also started high school, so homework got really busy. So I feel like I'm not as busy now, and I guess the one way it would have affected me is because when I had all those extracurriculars, I got really efficient with doing homework, so I would be okay with procrastinating, and because I would still get things done. I feel like that's probably one way it affected. Yeah, made me a better procrastinator.
Any closing remarks?
Any closing remarks? Yeah. I just feel like a major part of my worldview is my change, becoming an Adventist, because I didn't grow up with it, and it's changed my lifestyle, I would say. I went from being to less busy, and I'd like to say I think more. I have a lot of thoughts that aren't really developed by now, but I think as I keep growing in Christ, growing every day, I'll be able to really figure out what I think about the world and my worldview. Yeah, it's a process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I guess I can go now, and really so growing up, my family was religious. We've never not been religious, like we've never been atheist or anything like that. But like I went to church. I went to La Sierra Spanish Church as a kid, and while I was there, my parents got divorced, and we still went. But then for some time, we kind of just stopped going. My mom wasn't too content with the situation. Like, ethnic churches can often be pretty conservative and stuff, and so they'd make remarks like, "Oh, it'd be in Spanish, it'd be like, but like, hermana, like sister, like, why are you wearing jeans? All this kind of stuff, So I'm gonna say that's like the only reason we left, but just life happened, and so we kind of left from the church from a little bit. So we were religious, but we weren't, going through the religious motions and all. But I started going to Lowland Academy. I'd been in public school through elementary, and at 6th grade, I went to Lowland Academy. And around that time, that's like when we started going back to church. My mom was like, okay, let's, give this another shot and everything. And so I definitely considered myself SDA. I've always considered myself SDA. But I think the one significant portion, like event in my life where I could say, like definitively, like, oh, I claimed Seventh-day Adventism as my own, was during a class in my junior year called Contemporary Issues, and in that class we had to lead out a discussion, and so my partner and we led out a discussion on the question of, is God a murderer? And kind of going through that, I came to the realization that I have to have my own beliefs, like, yeah, sure, I'm SDA, but, does that just mean I take in all the values, or, do I think for myself? And so it's kind of at that point I was like, okay, let's start doing a little research here and there, and kind of seeing what that's going to look like for my life. And so for me, that really played out in having a lot of conversations with friends, majority friends, and then some pastors too. And I'd say I grew a lot in being able to, like, in knowing what I believed when I was able to, I'd say, be able to properly defend my viewpoint in like an intelligent debate with someone who opposed my viewpoint. And so that really characterized like my last 2 years of high school, and like trying to figure out what I believed. But all throughout high school, but especially in those last 2 years, I was pretty involved in the church. My favorite thing to do was either do like tech for like services or play my guitar for worship, and but I did it all, from collecting the money during the main service to even a little bit of preaching in the Sabbath school. And I think that also became a really big part of who I was, because I saw that especially my sophomore year, a lot of people my age left the church, and that wasn't for me. I enjoyed the church. I saw value in organized religion, and it really became a part of who I was. One drawback I'd say though during that time, like one fault of my own, would be that I was often, I'd say the majority of that time, not until recently, I often equated working for God as having a relationship with God. So I think that was one of my drawbacks, where I would, be super involved in the church, but I never made personal time for God. And that really changed this past August, and still now, because I started going to this ministry called Fusion, and it's like this homeless ministry where we go out in San Bernardino, and I really enjoyed it because in the midst of a pandemic, all the churches are closed and stuff, but I was able to still do what I loved, and that's serving, especially in a religious context. And it was through this ministry that I found some like the most like godly people my age that I've ever met. And in my paper, I kind of described them as like strangely kind and genuine people, because like, going to the academy and church, I knew church people, but like, I felt like there's like a difference, a difference between church people and then like godly people, And it kind of, in talking with them, something that they all had in common was that they had like daily devotionals with God. They had an actual meaningful relationship where they actually like, spent time and like as if like God was an actual friend, and you go out and hang out with your friends and like spending actual time with them, not just like my relationship, whereas where I worked a lot for God, but I didn't make personal time in like prayer and devotion and like reading my Bible. And so that's kind of where you see.
I know. So I have a quick question. So I feel like a lot of people struggle with that, right? Like making sure they have a personal connection with God. So how were you able to were you just able to have some time here and there for devotion, or what exactly did you do to kind of strengthen that personal relationship that you have with God?
I think in a sense, school, I'm kind of schedule oriented, kind of like Heidi said, having school, and then my school starts at 8 o'clock, and then I made sure I wake up at 7 every day, and so that gave me an hour to do whatever I needed, but I had dedicated time to reading my Bible and praying, and it's very different from before. I'd never done that, especially having like a dedicated time, and I think like any new habit, it's hard starting, but slowly through going through it every single day, it became easier, and I even saw changes in my own mood and like even how I felt throughout the day. I even found that it was like easier to pay attention in class and stuff like that. So I did see benefits outside of the religious aspect, which was kind of cool,
Definitely.
Yeah, so I definitely find some value in that, doing that each and every day. But yeah, so that's been a pretty big and important part of who I am, and like I said, I often had differing opinions from a lot of my peers, and I got that from some of my I've described my religious values as more conservative, and I learned that from just peers that I don't know, for whatever reason I felt that I could just agree with them more. It's something I was never like indoctrinated with any certain beliefs, religious or political, by my parents, but I just felt more drawn to like what are typically known as conservative values, and that's really like poured over into my political life as well, my political beliefs. I really started paying attention to politics, I guess, like 2019, around that time, because with all the hustle and bustle, growing up as a teenager, and during this time, uh, we live in the Trump era, and it's pretty hard to ignore politics in this kind of climate,
Definitely.
And so it was around that time that I was like, okay, let's see what this is. Let me do a little research for myself, and like I said, I definitely have still those conservative religious values carried on into my political life, and so I do consider myself like a conservative or a Republican. But I found out a lot more than just like what I believed regarding politics. In my paper, I kind of referred to politics as like a necessary evil. It's one of those things that we need it as a society to function, but in virtually every single form of government that there has ever existed, there's been some kind of corruption, some kind of misleading, and so it's often led like a distaste in my mouth, especially in today's climate, like 2020. There's a massive distrust in the media, and I'm definitely along with that. And like in what we consider like legacy media, which is like a lot of these like big news outlets, and I just see distrust with like misleading information, and a lot of these so-called objective journalists, they're a lot closer to the 1% than they really are to us, the 99, and so they're gonna, they have political beliefs and affiliations and leanings, and they're gonna push that onto their viewers, and do whatever is best for them. So that's just kind of like my 2 cents on like what politics is like. But I would say that there is something I do owe to the world of politics, and that is being able to stand up for myself, and holding myself, and I guess in a sense others, accountable, because being a conservative in 2020 in Southern California is
Not very popular.
exactly not very popular, and so I kind of appreciate politics in a sense that because I have a differing opinion, I kind of get to be that devil's advocate for other people. And I found that I have to hold myself accountable for doing my own research, because it often be a lot easier just to believe what everyone else is believing, but when I have to prove my point, or show evidence for my point, it's kind of like maybe a little bit bolder as a person, and stronger in my character, that I can stand up for what I believe, because that's just what you have to do when you have an unpopular opinion and you're a vocal person. Like I tend to be, maybe sometimes a little bit too much. But I really think that goes into being an informed voter is like one of the best ways you can serve your fellow citizens and the world as a whole. Because I think us as Americans have an especially important duty to the world, that every 4 years we elect the leader of the free world, and that doesn't just affect us, that affects everyone,
Yeah.
And so I really do think that participating in the free exchange of ideas and being the most informed you can be is really important to being a productive member of society, and that's I find that's a good way to serve in your community, just being the best informed you can be. Are we gonna say something, Heidi?
Yeah. Do you ever feel like sometimes your viewpoints may clash too much, causing like, do you find yourself in a lot of like, times where you butt heads with people and you kind of like is this worth like arguing for or something?
There's there's been very minimal cases like that where it's like in hindsight, yeah, I should just walked away from the conversation. You know, I'm used to it at this point, I'd say, you know, just always being that differing opinion that I really don't care, you know. I've learned to, I guess, like maintain my cool too. It's just like it is what it is, you know. Like I know you're gonna disagree with me, and you know, um, I appreciate living in a like I said, I appreciate living in a space where I am the minority, because it just makes me think differently, and I hope people can view me sometimes as something good too, because it provides them a different point of view instead of just being stuck in the little echo chamber of ideals similar to their own. But yeah, there's definitely times where like I should have like backed off. I have even like lost friends because of it, especially recently in 2020 with all of this political craziness. So, but yeah, that's really what entails my worldview paper, and yes, that's pretty much it. You guys have any final
closing remarks?
Yeah.
Be an informed person.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank you on behalf of our trio for tuning in to our first episode. Who knows, there may be more of the Worldview Podcast.
Never know.
Exactly. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed our episode. Bye.